שלום לכולם, אני גיא מבייביס, ואנחנו גוף ישראלי, מרכז ישראלי שמלווה תהליכי פונדקאות בארצות הברית, ובנינו פתרון שמסתמך בעצם על 5 שנות ניסיון בתהליכים האלה, ושמבטיח 100% הצלחה. מבטיח 100% הצלחה במובן שהצלחנו למצוא מרפאה שהיא מספיק טובה, וסוכנות שהיא מספיק אנושית, שיסכימו לעבור, לתת את כל תהליכי ההפריה החוץ גופית, ההחזרות שנדרשות תמורת סכום יחיד, למצוא פונדקאיות עד שתהיה לכם לידה אחת, או עד שיהיו לכם 2 לידות במחיר אחיד, במחיר כזה שלא תהיה קטסטרופה בתוך התהליך הזה. התהליכים כולם מתרחשים במדינת נבדה, יש לזה כמה יתרונות. עורכת הדין קים סורט שנמצאת כאן היא זו שכתבה את החוק בנבדה, שהוא היום החוק המתקדם ביותר בארצות הברית לפונדקאות. התהליך הוא חוקי, 2 האבות מוכרים בתור הורים עוד לפני הלידה, וכתוצאה מזה אתם בעצם מאוד מאוד מוגנים ונהנים מתהליך מאוד חלק שלא מצריך שום השתתפות או שום בעיה. אז אני נורא, ואנחנו בתור בייביס עם ניסיון של 70 הורים מהארץ שליווינו בתהליך הזה, מלווים אתכם מההתחלה ועד הסוף, דואגים ללוקליזציה של התהליך שמפחיתה עלויות בהרבה אלפי דולרים, ונשמח נורא מחר ככה להרחיב על איך התהליך נבנה בפגישות 1 על 1, כי זה תהליך נורא מורכב מבחינת החלקים השונים שלו. מה שכן, בגלל שהוא מאוד מורכב, ובגלל שאנחנו מאמינים שפונדקאות היא לא רק גוף שמלווה אתכם בתהליך, ולא רק סוכנות שמאתרת פונדקאית, או רופאים שעושים את תהליך ההפריה החוץ גופית, או תהליך משפטי, אלא שילוב של כל הדברים האלה יחד, והכל צריך לעשות נכון ומדויק ואופטימלי. אז נראה לנו מאוד מאוד משמעותי שתכירו את כל האנשים שמלווים אתכם את התהליך, והבאנו את כולם לארץ, ואנחנו מביאים אותם לארץ 1 ל3 חודשים. לא מספיק לעבוד עם מישהו שאתה מכיר את הסוכן, או שאתה מכיר רק את המרפאה, אתה רוצה להכיר את כל התהליך כולו, להרגיש בטוח במי שמלווה אותך בתהליך, ולצאת איתו לדרך. אנחנו כאן יחד עם FCLV, עם דוקטור סעיד דרמשן, שבחודשים האחרונים התחיל ללוות 20 Israeli clients in the last couple of months that have started the process in Nevada. Darcy is in charge of matching you with surrogate. It's usually a 3-month period until you're matched. And Kim, who has written the most progressive law in the United States, basically in the world, is the one who takes you smoothly through the legal process. Bruce Shapiro is the founder of FCLV, but I'll give the stage for this brief talk to Saeed, and we will be down under to schedule one-on-one meetings later on. Anyone who schedules one-on-one meetings with us tomorrow will, and this is sort of the fun part, will get into a draw. The winner will get sort of vacation in Europe before you start the process from us, just in order to have some fun before you're starting to wake up in the middle of the night with your kids.
So Darshpur and I were going to talk a little bit about how to maximize success and minimize cost in the journey through surrogacy to parenthood. So one of the things that is most important in this process is to make sure that we find the very best quality egg donor and the healthiest surrogate to maximize our chance of pregnancy. For example, many of you want to potentially transfer 2 embryos back into the uterus, and you know that a twin pregnancy has a higher risk of preterm labor and delivery, higher risk of diabetes, higher risk of blood pressure. So what we want to do is we want to minimize that risk. We can't eliminate the risk, but the one way we can minimize the risk is to make sure that we have a surrogate that sort of meets all the criteria that we have for someone who would be able to have a twin pregnancy, and maximize the chance that that twin pregnancy is going to go to term, at least near term. So what does that mean? That means a surrogate should have at least 2 previous deliveries. Natural pregnancies are preferred over C-section, especially when we're talking about twins. Want to make sure it's somebody who's in good physical shape. Want to make sure there's no medical issues. And what we also do is we look at other things that are important. You know, what was the weight of the babies that the surrogate had in her previous pregnancies? Has she ever had a twin pregnancy before? So I'll give you an example of something that happened just a couple of months ago that made us think, okay, well, this particular surrogate was not a good match with the intended fathers that we have. We have some intended fathers in Europe, and one of them wanted to have a twin pregnancy, transfer 2 embryos. So we had a surrogate that was already screened, came to our office, and what we always do is before, when we have the surrogate in our office, she spends a good part of the day in our office, and we do all the testing on her. So we do the testing for infectious disease, we do urine testing for drugs and medications, and then what we do is we pretend we're actually going to do the transfer. So we do something called a trial transfer. So we measure the dimensions of the uterus, we take a catheter, we look at the depth of the uterus to make sure that we have normal depth, that we're not going to have any problems at the time when the embryos are ready. Because you don't want, you want to make sure you anticipate and are prepared for any potential issues. So when I looked at the dimensions of the uterus and I looked at the depth of the uterus, we found the uterus was smaller than average. And so in her initial profile, the surrogate had said that she had a baby that was right around 6 pounds. And so when I inquired further, it ended up being that the baby that she'd had previously was about 5 pounds 9 ounces, which is again a little bit less of an average. The uterine dimensions were smaller, and so we felt that that particular surrogate was going to be fine for a singleton gestation, but would have a higher risk of a preterm labor and delivery. So what we ended up doing is I called the intended fathers and said, I think if you want to do a single embryo transfer, she's great, she's wonderful, she's got a great personality, she's intelligent, I think she's very excited to help you. But the twin pregnancy, I think we're going to potentially have a higher risk of preterm delivery. The intended fathers really want to have 2 embryos transferred, so we ended up finding another surrogate for those intended fathers. So these are some of the examples of ways in which we have to make sure that we manage the whole journey to minimize the chance of complications like preterm labor and delivery and really maximize your success. We have a staff of over 50 people in our office. We have 5 top-notch embryologists. We have 1 from New York City, we have 1 from Australia, we have 2 from California and 1 from Nevada. We've really gathered the best of the group in order to maximize our rates. And if you look at our rates, there's a website called fertilitysuccessrates.com. You can take a look in our rates and how we rank amongst 500 or 600 other clinics in the United States. So I think our research, our publications, and really our attention to detail is one of the reasons why we have a great deal of success, not only in Israel, but all around the world. And it's our really honor and privilege to take care of you and take care of our intended parents and help them in their journey to parenthood. As a father of 3 children and 3 daughters, it's the most incredible adventure you're going to have in your life. And so, to me, it's the greatest thing that I've done, being a father. And so I wish that upon all of you and all the intended parents that are here. So with that in mind, I want to make sure Dr. Shver had say as well. Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to do is just talk quickly about how we go about choosing the egg donor. And remember, for the journey, we need 3 major components. We need someone to carry the pregnancy, the uterus. We need an egg donor to supply the eggs, and we need the sperm. So from you all, we get the sperm. So we need to replace the uterus and the eggs. And Dr. Donovan just talked about the uterus, so I'm going to talk about the eggs. And what we need to do in human reproduction is we need to maximize the number of eggs that we have to work with. And the reason for that is that humans aren't particularly efficient at reproduction. So typically in women, about 15 to 20 eggs begin development each month in a woman, but only 1 makes it to maturities that can be fertilized. So what we want to do is we want to get more than that, because the efficiency of the whole process is such that for every 10 fertilized eggs we get about 2 to 3 good embryos. So if we get 20 fertilized eggs, we probably get on average about 4 to 6 good embryos. And then that gives us a lot of leeway to get a pregnancy, because not all the 6 are going to be perfect. You know, they'll probably be ranking. Maybe they'll be the top one, the second best, third best, fourth best, and etc. So the more we have, the greater the likelihood that we're going to have a group that's going to be of sufficient quality to be able to result in a pregnancy. So to do that, we do ultrasounds on the donors that we have to make sure that they have a lot of eggs going into the cycle. So right at the beginning of the cycle, we can do an ultrasound and we can see how many eggs they're recruiting. And the more eggs they recruit, the more eggs we're going to get at the end of the stimulation. And then the next thing that, of course, that we want to know is, you know, younger women have better eggs than older women. So we want our donors to be on the younger side. So most of our donors are in their 20s. And then we want to make sure that they can go through the whole process. So we want to make sure that psychologically they're stable and that they have pleasant enough personalities so they can follow instructions and be able to work with us. So Dr. Donishman and I, we interview all of the donors that are going to work with us. We look at them and we determine first, would we want this particular person as our donor? And if the answer is no, then we don't want them as your donor either. The next thing is they go through screening with a psychologist. And the psychologist does a personality inventory on them to make sure that they're stable, they can follow instructions, that they really want to proceed with the process, and they're not under any other undue pressure to do that. And once they pass that, then we go on to the next screening. We want to make sure also that the women don't carry any genetic disorders that can be passed on to the baby. So we do a very extensive genetic screen to make sure that the women aren't carriers for any disease, that should the same disease be carried by the father, that the baby could have a terrible disease instead of just being a carrier. So we get this genetic screen on the individuals. And then we also want to make sure their chromosomes are normal. So we want to make sure they have the normal number of chromosomes, because if they have an abnormal number of chromosomes, the baby could be abnormal, or they could have a higher incidence of miscarriage, which we don't want as well. So we look at their chromosomes. Well, we also want to make sure, even though these women are not likely to do so, we want to make sure that they haven't used any drugs in the recent period. So what we do is we do a drug screen on them, and these are not the kind of women that would do that, but we want to make absolutely certain. So we do that. Then they go to the next screening process, and we do an infectious disease screen. We want to make sure that they don't carry any disease that could be passed on either to the embryo or could be passed on to the surrogate or gestational carrier. So once they pass all these screening tests, then they're pretty much ready to go. And then we stimulate them with medications so that all of the eggs they have available for production are produced. And so we let those eggs develop to maturity, and then we take the eggs out, we fertilize them, they're synchronized with the gestational carrier, and then we put the embryos back in at just the right time, and 5 days later we know if it worked. So that's pretty much the process in a nutshell, and what we try to do is we try to make sure that every step is optimized. So from the very beginning to getting the donors, getting the gestational carriers, we want the whole process to be as perfect as we can make it. And if we can do that, then the likelihood that it's going to work is going to be optimized and going to give you the best possibility of taking home a baby.
One of the things that we have to do when we use a gestational carrier surrogate in the United States is we have to do FDA screening. So if we're going to have sperm shipped over to the United States, we have to have an SOP, a standard operating procedure. There has to be a physician here and we can arrange that for a physician here to do the FDA screening. The blood has to be taken here and then sent over to an FDA-registered lab in the United States, for it to be cleared. Typically what we have is we have our intended parents come to the U.S., to our clinic, either in Los Angeles or Nevada, and they give us a sperm sample for freeze. We do the FDA screening. They get a chance to actually tour the clinic, meet our team, the embryologists, our surrogacy coordinators, and then from there we have the sperm frozen. And one of the questions we're often asked is, this frozen sperm, is it different versus fresh sperm in terms of the success rates? There's no difference. You can actually freeze sperm for 20 years and utilize it to fertilize eggs. Yes?
Why would one go to the travel going up to Las Vegas if one can get kind of the same service close to New York where it's much easier to get from Israel?
Well, I think it's a couple of reasons. Number one is that, well, actually, you mentioned New York, and we were just having a discussion about, surrogacy is not legal in New York. So you can't have a surrogate from New York.
Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut. Well, there are many, many good clinics and lots of different great agencies in the United States. And I think that as intended parents, you just have to see who you feel comfortable with, who appeals to you in terms of different characteristics, be it pregnancy rates, be it the warmth of the physician, the bond that you create with the physician and their team. So I think just much like anything, there's lots of different options that patients have, and a lot of times, essentially your egg donor could be in Minnesota, your gestational carrier or surrogate could be from California, and your doctor could be in Nevada.
And Las Vegas is warmer and more fun.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.